Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshulamilitan Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaye Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantam Manupetya Apetya Krityam Rapayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tan Mayataya Tadavo Binedus Tam Savabhutam Hridayam Munimanatusmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaivanarottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Bhaktya Vihina Parada Lakshay Kiptashta Kamari Tarangamadye Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapanna Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Tavevasmi Najivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanandike Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, today is the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Gosvami Maharaj, and we're going to speak a little of him, a few words. What can you say? These personalities, so dear to Radha and Krishna, their glories unlimited. And of course, our realization is so small. So it's almost, it's like offering a candle to the sun, right? Or Jamuna water, back to the Jamuna. There's only by the mercy of that personality can we say anything at all. So we'll begin by offering our obeisance to, first, our beloved Diksha Guru, Srila Nityalila Pavishta Om Vishnupad Asta Talsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, Diksha, and of course, Eternal Shiksha Guru. And also to our Sannyas Guru, who's also our Shiksha Guru, Sri Nityalila Pavishta Om Vishnupad Asta Talsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. So I was thinking what to do, what to speak about. I mean, there are so many things to take from. The Rays of the Harmonist, so many articles that he's written about Sri Guru, the appearance of Sri Guru, disappearance of Sri Guru, writings by his own Gurudev, by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada about this day, his accomplishments, everything that was done, the various biographies of him, Sri Guru Darshan. I can't remember the title of Madhav Maharaj's book. That also, many amazing revelations and stories. So I'm going to just begin by reading the Mangalacharana prayers that were composed for him by disciples. And in those, some hints, realizations about that personality, their mission, their internal moods. The first one is very standard. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Iti Namane. The person who wrote that was saying that he probably should have written Sri Radha Priyatmane, some grammatical thing, but the meaning is the same. I offer pranam to Om Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami, who is very dear to Srimati Radhika. Om Vishnupad means, of course, that he is always at the feet of Lord Vishnu, Krishna, very dear to Lord Krishna. But in this particular prayer, also the idea that is not always revealed about our acharyas, their very specific and deep relationship with Srimati Radhika. All of the acharyas in our line are Rupanuga. And Rupanuga means followers of Rupa Goswami, and it means followers of Rupa Manjari. That is a specialty of the prominent acharyas in our line. 6 Goswamis, right? Krishnadas Kaviraj, Narottam Srinivas Shamananda, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan, Jagannath Das Babaji, Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Gurudev as well. They have special affinity towards Srimati Radhika and her service. Bandeham Sri Guru Vadam Sri Rupanuga Pravaram Vraja Rasa Rasikam Cha Narayanam Tam Prapandam. I surrender myself and offer prayers to that most exalted Sri Guru, Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, who is the best among the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami, and who is always absorbed in relishing Braja Ras. In so many prayers that we read, we'll read about this Vaishnava or that Vaishnava, the best among the followers, topmost, this and that. And then someone might ask, well, what about this personality? What about that personality? One time, Srila Gurudev was speaking, and he was talking about his own Gurudev, the topmost follower of Mahaprabhu, right? And one of his disciples asked him, but you've already said Rupa Goswami was the topmost. And then he explained, topmost for me. You know, Rupa Goswami, and Bhaktivedanta Keshav spoke about his guru in the same way. That I may have been there in the time of Mahaprabhu's pastimes, but he did not deliver me. None of these other personalities delivered me. My guru came and delivered me. So for me, he is the topmost of the followers of Mahaprabhu, or in this case, the topmost followers of Rupa Goswami. And by saying follower of Rupa Goswami, you know, this idea of Rupanuga, this is one of the specialities of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaj's teachings. He wanted to explain to us what Rupanuga really means. Our Srila Prabhupada also said many times we are Rupanuga. He named one of his very first and very dear disciples Rupanuga. Right? But what does Rupanuga mean? It's not a general thing that we're in the same line as Rupa Goswami. What was described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in great detail by Krishnadas Kaviraj, that in the same way that Lord Vishnu, Lord Narayan, Lord Krishna spoke and revealed within the heart of Lord Brahma all the Vedic truths, and then he wrote and gave it to everyone else, he said, in the same way, Mahaprabhu has inspired Rupa Goswami from within the heart, but in a very special way, even a deeper way. Lord Brahma, this doesn't minimize Lord Brahma, but it shows that the teachings, Krishna has a plan. The universe is on a time scale, right? And just as in Krishna Leela, there are 8 periods of the day, and different pastimes take place throughout that day, defined kinds of pastimes, and throughout his life, from babyhood to young childhood to older, then going to Dwarka. These things all go on a timeline. The plan for the universe also has its timeline, the plan for the deliverance. And at the end of Dwapara Yuga, Krishna decided, I will appear now and show my pastimes, my most confidential pastimes. Pastimes so amazing that by the influence of Yogamaya, both myself and my beautiful Brajadevi's gopis will be completely immersed in those, bewildered and amazed by the depth of the love that we're exchanging and the intimacy of that. But then, in the Kali, and this is for the benefit of the people in the Kali Yuga, it was to be preserved in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but who could understand it? Even during Krishna's time, who could understand it? Hardly anyone. Srila Prabhupada one time said only a handful of people really understood who Krishna was, outside of Braj and all. So, especially to understand the secret and intimate and exalted nature of his pastimes in Braj, and especially those with the gopis, very difficult to understand. So then he decided, okay, I'll come again myself, but I will come as a teacher, and I will come as a devotee. By coming as a devotee, two things are accomplished. One, I can taste these pastimes from the perspective of my great devotees, from the perspective and mood of the gopis themselves, especially Srimati Radhika. And because I can taste them in that way, I can actually teach it and reveal it to the fullest extent. Even Vedavyas could not understand and teach it to the fullest extent. He witnessed the pastimes, he recorded them faithfully, and he could taste them in a very beautiful way, but he's Vishnu Tattva, and so he's Vishaya. He can understand things from the perspective of Krishna himself, not from the perspective of the devotee. And the Bhagavatam is meant for the devotees, to teach them. All the different incarnations that appear in the Bhagavatam, the thing that is being taught for us is the reciprocal mood and the special position of the devotees of each of those incarnations, and the evolution and development of love in bhakti that they're showing in increasing deeper ways. Ninth canto finally comes to Lord Ram, which is the closest thing to Krishna Lila, and then 10th canto, Krishna Lila, right? So Mahaprabhu came to teach how to develop love of God as a devotee. Only as a devotee could he actually teach it. He explains that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? And coming to teach that, he had to choose someone who would reveal it in the most confidential way, who would be qualified to explain this to the world. And he, just as he taught Lord Brahma the universal teachings of the four Vedas, the Upanishads, all of that, Itihasas, Puranas, and empowered him with all of that. And then he empowered Narad, who empowered Vedavyas. He gave special realization to Rupa Goswami about the very rare love that he himself came to taste in the mood of Radhika, and the very rare love that the jivas are eligible to enter into as servants of Srimati Radhika. Right? Unnata Ujvala Rasam Svabhakti Sriyam, that very confidential bhakti to Radhika herself in her service to Sri Krishna. And so that is the real meaning of Rupanuga. Even though Rupa Goswami taught very broadly about devotion, he came specifically to reveal the most confidential part of Parakya Ras, Parakya Bhav, right? That Radha and Krishna are experiencing. And then, for the first time, those who were servants of Srimati Radhika, the idea of Manjari had never been revealed before. Those confidential maidservants who don't have a direct relationship with Krishna themselves, but they are satisfying Krishna. They are kamatmika, they are kamanuk. They want to satisfy Krishna's lusty desires, right? His desire to taste Shringar Ras, but they want to satisfy it by assisting his most dearly beloved Srimati Radhika. And so by assisting her, they're helping Krishna to taste love on the very highest platform. And this is the topmost position that a living entity can achieve, to be a manjari, actually. What could be higher than to be a servant of Srimati Radhika? Who could be closer to Sri Krishna and understand his desires more than those who are the servants of Srimati Radhika, who is his most confidential beloved and knows everything of him. So, best among the followers of Sri Rupa Goswami. Then, Sri Guru Charanam Vande Ramana Prashtaya Bhutale Rupanuga Bhaktidam Chakripa Murtim Narayanam. I worship the lotus feet of Sri Guru, Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, who in this world is most dearly loved by Sri Ramana Bihari. That's Krishna, right? He is the embodiment of mercy and bestows the treasure of Rupanuga Bhakti, right? But that name, Sri Ramana Bihari, means that Krishna who gives great pleasure to Srimati Radhika, Sri Radha Raman, right? Then Sri Krishna Lila Katane Sudaksham, Audarya Madhurya Gunais Chayuktam, Varan Varanyam Purusham Mahantam Narayanam Tvam Shirasanamami. O Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, you are most expert in describing Krishna Lila and are fully endowed with the qualities of magnanimity and sweetness. You are the best of all great souls. I bow my head to you. In this prayer, there's a philosophical conception there, which we could spend the whole class on. But by combining the ideas, fully endowed with the qualities of magnanimity and sweetness, right? Audarya, Madhurya, Gunais Chayuktam. One of the extraordinary things of Srila Narayana Maharaj's teachings, which were the teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, the teachings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the teachings of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, to help us understand the non-difference between Krishna Lila and Mahaprabhu Lila, but the speciality of each one. Mahaprabhu's Lila is characterized by magnanimity, audarya, right? In other words, distribution, giving this to everyone. And we just completed reading the pastime of Jagkai and Madhai, which shows that to the greatest extent, the quality of unlimited mercy, causeless mercy, right? But not just causeless mercy to give general love of God, madhurya, to give that mercy to, this realization of love of God in Braj Prem, which is what Chaitanya Charitamrita describes. Mahaprabhu came to distribute love of God and specifically Braj Prem, right, Madhurya. So within his Audarya pastimes, he's tasting the sweetness of Krishna Lila and distributing that sweetness, right? So within Krishna Lila, there's Audarya, and within Mahaprabhu's Lila, there's Madhurya. One may appear prominent, but actually they're both mixed together very beautifully and very wonderfully. What makes Mahaprabhu's pastime so magnanimous is what he is distributing, the quality of the sweetness of love of God that he's actually revealing. And then that brings me to kind of what I wanted to talk about. I was trying to figure out what should I talk about. There's so many things, stories, this or that. But one thing came to mind, because on this day, there are many people around the world who, out of a sense of loyalty to their own guru or to their own institution, they're not able to necessarily relish or appreciate the contributions of another personality, another great acharya, thinking that if they do, it somehow minimizes their guru. Oh, my guru came to give everything. Why are you saying that he did this and he didn't, It's not like that. It's not like that. Srila Gurudev is not different than our Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, as neither of them are different from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, who's not different from Bhaktivedanta Thakur, who's not different from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Baladev Vidyabhushan or any of our acharyas. And yet, if you examine the writings and the way they teach, they may all appear to present things slightly differently. And for devotees that are not self-realized, now I'm not self-realized, but I can explain this, that sometimes it appears that one may be correct, one's incorrect. One's teachings may be so-called higher, one may be so-called lower, right? Even nowadays, there are great arguments between what Jiva Goswami was actually teaching, what he wasn't teaching. And there are many different camps. I mean, we just finished reading about how people misunderstand Advaita Acharya and what he was teaching and how he was teaching and for what purpose, right? So when I think of Gurudev, I think, first of all, of the broader mission. And each of our acharyas has a role in that, right? I mean, even amongst the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, we know our Srila Prabhupada, and we know that externally his contribution, you can't measure it, you can't match it. In terms of accomplishments in the preaching field, no one could compare to that. He did more in that way than anyone. Even his own Guru Maharaj. I mean, he would be aghast to hear anyone say that because he was fully empowered by his Guru Maharaj. And his Guru Maharaj set the template. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada set the model, set everything in motion, and then our Srila Prabhupada was like his Anga, like his empowered person. But if you look at it and say, oh, Srila Prabhupada, he did this more than anyone. Yes, he did. But it doesn't diminish in any way Srila Saraswati Prabhupada. He had his role. He came to India. He did something that Bhaktivedanta Thakur did not do. Bhaktivedanta Thakur wanted to establish a worldwide mission, preaching mission, but he wrote to his own son and said, oh, I've not had time or been able to do this, now you should do this. Spread the glories and inform the world about the glories of Sri Mayapur through publication and distribution of books, right? And he did that in an extraordinary way. According to where the world was at that time, he started in India. And then amazingly, our Srila Prabhupada then set this worldwide stage for the teachings of Mahaprabhu by distributing these teachings everywhere by Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Many other books, Nectar of Devotion, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Instruction, and so many other books based on his lectures. But again, his audience was what? He took the next step. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada one time said, I wanted to teach so much more about Rupa Goswami's teachings, right? But I couldn't. I had to cut jungles of Mayavad, impersonalism, Sahajaism, right? India was not ready for it yet. So I had to establish a platform. He did teach it, but he was very cautious, right? And then his disciples, they also continued teaching in variegated ways. He had many exalted personalities who were following him, and after his disappearance, continued preaching vigorously in India under very difficult conditions during World War II, right, which India was completely impoverished and distracted. Then at the time of liberation and independence, completely bankrupt country with no infrastructure, very difficult, but they pushed on and pushed on. And one time, Srila Prabhupada said about that, he said about Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he said he could have delivered everything. He could have done everything himself because he was Vaishnava. But he said the Lord had a plan, and he left remnants for us. The Lord has a plan to step by step reveal fully what he came to give as Mahaprabhu. And so, even from the time of Rupa Goswami, we will see how it appears to, well, let me explain it like this. When he came, Rupa Goswami, he wrote all about Madhurya Ras, Parikya Bhav, right? Jiva Goswami, though, who was his topmost disciple, who was responsible for establishing irrefutably the philosophical support, tattvic, shastric support for everything that Rupa Goswami wrote. And he did that in his Sandarbhas, pulling all the evidence from all the different scriptures of the world, Puranas, Upanishads, everything, Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, to prove what Rupa Goswami was saying. And yet, during his time, there are many people, Vaishnavas, who couldn't accommodate Parakiya mood, the idea of unwedded love. They didn't have the eligibility to understand its transcendent beauty. So in many places he wrote about Svakya, married love. And for many, it appeared that he gave that prominence. There are many places where he clearly says Parakiya is topmost, but there are many places where he establishes Svakya. And for many years, even generations, there was this debate. Who's the true follower of Rupa Goswami? Who's the true follower of Jiva Goswami? But then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur came, and Gurudeva said that actually Jiva Goswami's speaking about Svakya gave Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur an impetus and a platform to establish the topmost perfection of Parakiya. Right? He didn't say that he came to defeat Jiva Goswami. He said that he came, that all of Jiva Goswami's writings of the contrast between Svakya and Parakiya gave Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur an opportunity to write further on it and to reveal that both Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami wanted the preeminence of Parakiya to be understood. Right? So no conflict, no division, nothing that one is right and one is wrong, just how the teachings have to be delivered according to time, place, and circumstance, eligibility of the audience, the readiness, and the master plan of Mahaprabhu. And even today, there are going to be people that are going to be more inclined to Svakya, and that's fine. That's an incredible conception, right? I mean, it exists in a place in Goloka Vrindavan. It exists in Dwarka also. But in other words, the point is that even though to some, during the time of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, some thought that he was opposed to Jiva Goswami and they even wanted to kill him. They tried to kill him. But out of his mercy, he showed himself as a manjari to them, as a topmost follower, and changed their heart, and then they realized. So, Bhaktivedanta Thakur came, and he also made allowances in many places for the misconceptions and lack of full understanding of his audience. You know, he wrote things like in his writings about the Bhagavat, he said, we're not so concerned about the descriptions in heaven and hell, that you find in 5th canto and places like that. These are just devices that were written by previous kings in order to bring people in order, to make them follow rules and regulations of the scripture, to put the fear of God in them, right? He wrote like that. And in the introduction to Krishna Samhita, he writes, the histories of the kings that, Manu and all that goes back in that time scale of the Bhagavatam, millions of years. People in the modern sense put that all within the context of 5,000 years. And so he does that. He says Manu appeared, like 5,000 years ago, and then all these great personalities he puts in within that compressed time frame. And he says, we don't really care about that. What we care about is the underlying message, right? And so that can confuse people. Bhaktivedanta Thakur says Bhagavatam's, some of it's mythical. It's not true. But, I'm not going to get into it, but if you read his words very closely, and with the language of a spiritual lawyer, you see how in spiritual legalese, there's plenty of loopholes in that language where he's not saying that that's how it is, but he's giving accommodation to people so that doesn't become an obstacle for them to approach the real thing, right? Step by step, so that they can go to the real thing. So, our Srila Gurudev then, when he came to America for the first time and to the Western world, it created somewhat of a firestorm as well, right? And this is what I want to talk about just for 5 or 10 minutes, because I experienced in ISKCON that, my godbrothers, godsisters, out of great loyalty to Srila Prabhupada and fear of being deviated from him, were not receptive to teachings of his godbrothers, like Bhaktivedanta Sridhar Maharaj and others. Because Srila Prabhupada presented things in a particular way according to his audience, right? His audience. I mean, even in regular education, any subject that you're studying, whether it's mathematics, history, grammar, language, everything is done differently, stage by stage, according to the qualification of the audience. You don't teach principles of calculus or even algebra or even geometry to preliminary students of arithmetic. It doesn't work. They can't understand it. You've got to build a foundation. It doesn't mean that the one who comes later and teaches these other subject matters, even though there may be in some cases things that appear to contradict the basic mathematics or basic things that you've taught in those same subjects, it's not. It's just a continuation and a flowering of that subject matter. So when Srila Gurudev came, his intent, he had 4 purposes in coming to the West. Right? He had been asked by our Srila Prabhupada, when Srila Prabhupada was leaving this world, to continue the education of his disciples. Srila Prabhupada was only here 10 years. And within that 10 years, he introduced almost the entirety of the teachings of Rupa Goswami, certainly by giving Srimad Bhagavatam, Upadesh Amrita, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Nectar of Devotion. He gave the outline of all of it, because Chaitanya Charitamrita is a summary study of everything that Rupa Goswami was taught by Mahaprabhu. But then there are further works, like Ujjvala Nidamani, Vidagdha Madhav, Lalit Madhav, others which go a little bit more deeper and a little more confidential. But nevertheless, he did give A to Z. But when it comes to the later parts, he did not have time, nor were we eligible at that time to study and pursue that kind of practice. He always said we're Rupanugas, and he spoke about Raganuga Bhajan, even in the very beginning of Nectar of Devotion, spontaneous devotional service in Chaitanya Charitamrita, so many places, but he didn't have time to go into the details and the evolution of practice from Vaidhi Bhakti to Raganuga Bhajan. What are the steps, how to do it? Nor did he go into the details of the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna as described, Vilap Kushmanjali and works like that, because we weren't eligible yet. But he certainly relished it and spoke to it, and many, many times. So just as Jiva Goswami taught about Rupa Goswami according to the eligibility of different kinds of audiences, so our Srila Prabhupada taught about Rupa Goswami, what Bhaktivinoda Thakur came to give, and others, according to the readiness of the whole Western and Eastern world outside of India. He had to establish the basics. You're not this body, right? You're not this body. You are spirit, soul, chanting the holy name. Everything is there. Chant with faith, Harinam. Do Guru Seva. Spread the mission of Mahaprabhu. Print books, distribute books. All of the things that were taught by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, he introduced, but step by step. Right? Step by step. when I listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures now, I hear him speaking, and some of it appears to be elementary. But now, having learned a little bit more of who Srila Prabhupada really is and what he really came to teach, I see hidden within his words and his writings so much more. And Gurudev said that your Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he came and he gave a treasure chest filled with jewels, but it was locked. You didn't have the key to open up and see to the full extent what he really came to give. See, I've come to give this. So he had this intention to come to the West at Srila Prabhupada's request, right? Please teach my disciples more. I didn't have time. So he said, and this doesn't describe their personal relationship. Their personal relationship was very, very close. Srila Prabhupada had so much faith in him. If we have time, well, we won't have time, but maybe when we have our program in the afternoon, I'll describe the stories, some of these stories about their relationship. Because I don't think that we should describe Srila Gurudev in the West without understanding his relationship with Srila Prabhupada, because they are part of the same mission, and they were like so close, extraordinarily close. Srila Prabhupada said, when I first saw you, I felt that same spontaneous love for you that I felt for my Guru Maharaj. That's a very high statement when you unpack that. That's very, very high. Any rate, he said, I came for 4 reasons. One, I wanted to visit the places where Swami Maharaj went and roll in the dust of those places. In other words, the temples he established, the places he preached. He went to Tompkins Park, went to the tree that Srila Prabhupada had gone to and chanted under, all these things. One time when he was in Seattle, visiting the devotees there, by that time ISKCON had moved to a nice, bigger temple. But the first little house they had, one devotee said, would you like to see it? Srila Prabhupada, this is the first place in Seattle that he went to. And that was the same house he was in when he heard about the disappearance of Bhaktivedanta Keshav Maharaj, the guru, Diksha guru of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaj. And he said, yes. And it's just some street, just some poor house. In the old days, we used to live in these poor neighborhoods, in these poor old rundown houses, because the rent was so cheap. And it was still like that. And who knows who was living in it then. But when they got out of the car, Srila Narayana Maharaj got out of the car and went up on the sidewalk and went to the steps and knelt down and touched his head to the steps to take the dust of that place. Who knows what, if anyone was watching or seeing what's going on, who's this sadhu, what's he doing? Not sadhu, who's this person in orange robes? They wouldn't know who he was or what he was doing, bowing down on the porch of somebody's house. But many places he went like that. And he was astonished, and he spoke that, everywhere I went, in the mountains, in the jungles, in the forests, by the rivers, in the plains, Swami Maharaj went everywhere, and as many places as he could, he went. The first place in America, 26 2nd Avenue, the first temple, he went there. New Vrindavan, so many places. I want to go to these pastime places and take the dust of Swamiji's feet. Then he said, and I want to offer respects to all of his disciples, because Gurudev had such respect for the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. When he was given that order by Srila Prabhupada to please help my disciples, he said, yes, I will do. But he said he was thinking that how can I help them? Because under Srila Prabhupada's direction, he saw that they had accomplished so much. Building temples all over India, all over the world. He saw them as so dedicated, so nishta, so expert, so accomplished, chanting every day, being very strict, going to programs, artiques. They don't need my help, he was thinking. But then over the years, without Srila Prabhupada there, things were, there were some struggles going on. So he thought, okay, one, I want to offer respects to them, and I want to help them. That's 3, Pastime places, offer respects, and then to help them, as Srila Prabhupada requested, by giving further teachings. I couldn't give them everything I wanted. I didn't have time. Continue their education, right? That. And I remember the first time I met Srila Gurudev, those 2 things were encompassed in the way he greeted me, One was when I was introduced by Shamarani, and, I'm wearing my outside clothes. I wasn't living in a temple at that time, my job and all like that. And he said in the softest voice, kindest voice, humblest voice, "Oh, I'm very pleased to meet you." I was astonished by the, what you could say, the meaning and the feeling within those words. It's absolutely full of affection and genuine humility and truth. How happy he was, for some reason or other, to meet me. I couldn't put my head around that. But I responded, because I was looking forward to meeting him. He'd come the year before, and one of my godbrothers called me and invited me, but they didn't tell me who it was. They just said somebody from India's come, and da-da-da-da-da, it just didn't resonate. But then in the interim, year before he came again, some books had been published, and one of my other godbrothers gave me a couple of the books. And they said, "Oh, he came here last year." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And then they described, that personality who gave Srila Prabhupada his samadhi. And I said, "Oh, I knew him. Why didn't they tell me that? I would have seen him in a minute." But, Krishna has his own time frame for all of us. Anyway, I read those books and said, I've got to meet him. And so after Gurudev said that to me, my heart was very softened, and I said, I'm so pleased to meet you, and I always wanted to thank you for your guiding us and performing our Guru Maharaj's Samadhi Mahotsava, right? That special festival. Because I went there from America as soon as I heard that Srila Prabhupada was left, and got there for the last day in Vrindavan, and then when we did it in Mayapur. And that's when I first saw Gurudev in India then, somebody pointed out. And I said, I'm very pleased to meet you, and then offered that. And somehow or other, I didn't have any motive in saying that, but I could feel that he was pleased by that acknowledgement and that exchange of gratitude, because Vaishnav. And Vaishnav communications are always reciprocal. You're giving love, you're receiving love. Love is going between. It's not to take, it's to give. And he came to give so much that your heart would automatically want to reciprocate. This was his power. And then we had a brief personal conversation, and he cleared something up for me that had been hanging in my heart and over my head for almost 20 years. Some doubt and pain I had, and he just immediately cleared it up. And I felt completely convinced that Srila Prabhupada was there at that time, and that he had sent Gurudev for that purpose. There's no doubt in my mind. And I have heard this same mood and feeling from many, many godbrothers. Right? And then the fourth thing he said, and I've come to laugh. And then when we went to his lectures in the evening in that place, San Francisco Bay Area, the way he gave lectures was very, very different. There were many components. The first, they were singing many beautiful songs, ashtakams, that I'd not heard, but they gave out song sheets. And there were many of his young girl disciples. Now they're all in their 40s and, even 50, with kids of their own. But at that time, they were like 10 to 15, 16 years old. But they were playing harmonium and organ and singing, right? And so Srila Narayana Maharaj would speak, and then he would have them sing a bhajan, right? And then he would tell a pastime in the midst of the bhajan. And it would be a joyful pastime, and he would laugh and be so happy. And the whole room, remember the room at that time was filled with such a mixture of devotees, mostly Prabhupada disciples. He had not had time to develop his own disciples and mission. It was only 1 year. There were some that were traveling with him from all over the world. He'd been collecting flowers, and so the room was filled from people of many, many countries. But the vast majority was my godbrothers and godsisters, right? And all experienced the same thing. And when I drove home, all I could do was chant and sing at the top of my lungs, uncontrollably, spontaneously. And I heard the same thing. I was watching this thing on Facebook, this statement of Nimai Chaitanya. He lives in Boston, you know him, the healer guy, really nice person. He was describing his own first experience, and when he drove home, he just spontaneously chanting. And when we hear the description of the qualities of Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam, Kanishta, the Shuddha Kanishta, is one who has come to chanting the holy name at least once, pure Shuddhanam. There's different descriptions of Kanishta, but this is Mahaprabhu's. Madhyam is one who's chanting continually. They're absorbed in chanting and entering into higher realizations, of course. But the Uttam is one who's fully internally absorbed, and by their chanting, others spontaneously want to chant. And in those series of evening lectures, I experienced a flood of spiritual energy and joy that I had never experienced since the time of Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada came and chanted and spoke, everyone was, and he would use this word, surcharged with spiritual energy. The room, the environment, it vibrated, it resonated, it roared. And with Gurudev, it wasn't roaring. Roaring is Audarya, right? Mahaprabhu, magnanimity, like we've been reading in Chaitanya Bhagavat, jumping up and down. This was like sweetness. And he would tell pastimes so that when we sang these songs and when we chanted Hare Krishna, it was imbued with the mood and sweetness of these pastimes, and something was being opened up and revealed to us, that this is what chanting is meant to do. It's meant to bring you in touch with this Leela, with this world, with this reality. This is where we are headed. And this was, in my mind, the speciality of his contribution. As I said, it's not different from Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. It doesn't minimize them to say that. But he brought the next chapter in the book of Mahaprabhu's preaching Leela, that now you've been chanting, you've been studying, let's go deeper into this Chaitanya Charitamrita. What is Srila Prabhupada really saying in this purport? What is Krishna's Kaviraj saying? What is within the words of this Krishna book? Because Srila Prabhupada didn't get to do 10th canto, but he did do Krishna book. So what is hidden in those words? And now I see so much more when I read Srila Prabhupada's purports. And I know that it's all there, the same power, the same sweetness is residing in his words, but the key to that treasure chest, that was what Srila Gurudev came to give, and to show us the jewels, to tell us about them, to describe them, to create a greed. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavatamati Kriyatam Yadi Katopi Labdyate Tattva Lolyam Api Mulyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukrataina Labdyate. Just by even Vaidhi Bhakti, for hundreds of lifetimes alone, you can't go to Goloka Vrindavan. It can take you to Vaikuntha. But to go to Goloka Vrindavan, according to Ramananda Roy, there's one price: greed, lolium. And greed is developed by hearing these sweet pastimes from a Tattva Rasik Vaishnav, right? And Srila Prabhupada gave us that greed, although we didn't know it, but he planted it in our hearts. You know, for most of us, we couldn't, I'm not speaking for all, but for most of us, we couldn't distinguish between Dwarka Leela, Krishna Leela, even Ram and everyone else. It's all, you know, Krishna is different forms. But there's speciality to Braj Prem. And this is what he came to show. And this way, Srila Prabhupada's real glory and mission is understood, right? And appreciated much, much more. Much, much more. So, as a disciple of Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, I can only feel the greatest appreciation and sense of debt that Gurudev reconnected me and taught me who my Guru really was and what my Guru really came to give me in those mantras, and guiding me on that path and solidifying and increasing my faith to him. Shiksha Guru does not mean he supplants or replaces your Diksha Guru. He reinforces and fulfills the purpose of your Diksha Guru. Right? They're like one soul, so close. So, we're out of time here, and this morning we're going to have another program. We're going to have bhajans at 12:30, and then Artik at 1, and then we'll have another class for guests that come here, and then we'll have our prasad. Right? So, what do we have today? We have Gora, we have Madhuri Devidasi, we have Nityananda Prabhu, Vrindavan Chandra, I guess Taruni's here. So I hope you're all having nice programs wherever you are. I'm sure in Alatra they're going to have a nice program. We're going to do the best we can. We don't have so many people here. 2.5. Just like in 2.5 means, like in Dwarka, Bhaktivedanta Keshwar should say 2.5 rasas, because Madhurya is not fully experienced. So even though there is some kind of conjugal relationship, there is parental, it's not fully realized, right? So even though there's 5, he counts it as 2.5. So even though we're 4, I count us as 2.5, because we're not, you know. We don't have the full complement of all the hands that you generally need to run a program like this. Okay, so all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, all glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Haribol.